Okay, just thought I'd put a video out on running comps using Propstream. I've been real happy with the data over the years from Propstream. I always start by saying nothing is as good as the MLS. So if you have the MLS, that is definitely the way to go. But I do like, and I'm typing in an address while I do this. I do like what we get from PropStream. So we're going to look at a deal that was actually that I had the opportunity to look at not too terribly long ago. And this is property in Conyers, Georgia. Now, PropStream gives you a wealth of information. You can look at this and you'll get like a quick feel for what its value in property is at. Now, is this going to be your exact comps? No, because the reality is it's almost like tax assessor data. It's not literally that, but kind of like, every property has to get a value. So, the software is going through and figuring out what it thinks based on what criteria it's been fed. Now, the thing you got to keep in mind is not every county feeds necessarily accurate data or the best data, because the reality is tax record data can be wrong and is quite often, actually. So that is something, you got to take this with a grain of salt. Okay. But the nice thing about this is you can see a lot of these numbers are fairly close to each other. Like there's not like a bunch of outliers. Like we have 300, but it's on the other side of this road here, which is probably a double lane road if I had to guess. So let's dive in. You'll see it's a 1,380 square feet. Um, Estimated equity 162, which tells us, hey, there's a small mortgage on this property. So when we click on it, it's going to take us into here. Now, some things I like to tell people about the screen. It's going to tell you the equity, which this is a high equity property, 77%, assuming the data is right. I want to caution you, I never get excited when I see that, because sometimes there are loans that are not recorded that can impact this. A classic example I've seen many times is a HELOC. Okay, I've seen many things where it's like, oh, the payoff is this, and you come up and like, actually, I got this HELOC for XYZ, right? And it's got to get paid back, and they borrowed money to pay the bills or buy a car or whatever they did. Who knows? So yeah, you can be excited, but always verify. Don't assume. So whenever you're talking to a seller, you're going to ask them about those things. Okay, it's going to give you an idea of the rent. I have found that these rents to be, relatively in the ballpark. In general, any piece of software that tells me the rent, I'm generally going to take it down 10%. And what I have found is that usually tends to be more where reality is. So if it says 1,500, I'm really estimating around 1,350. If it says 2,000, I'm probably going to be around 1,800. If I'm at 1,000, probably like 900. You get the idea. You go conservative. Okay. It's going to show you this average sale price, which may or may not be indicative of the comps, and we can click open comps in a minute to see. But you'll see it has an estimated balance, which, by the way, we actually did find out for this property that it's actually fairly close. I think it was around maybe $5,000 off or something like that. So that actually could be pretty reasonably accurate. It'll show you here. This is an interesting thing they've done where they give you an estimated value on what it was last year. So they're actually showing you the trend for this specific property, which I like. It gives me an idea of, okay, well, if this property only went down $4,000, then chances are that neighborhood is probably going to be stable. Okay. But the important thing is the trends, especially when you're in a volatile market like what we're in now. Okay, you'll see some things here owned for 23 years, 6 months. That's always nice to see. You'll see a bunch of information, so forth. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the comparables. If I click open comps, it'll take me there too. Okay, now it's going to show me the basic information about the property. Now, what I like about PropStream is I can pull public record, MLS, or both. Okay, so just to walk through it, I'll click public record to start. Now, public record comp can include MLS comp, so it's not necessarily off market, which is why, I'll show you when you do both, but just that's something to keep in mind is public record does not mean off. It could be off market, okay? And if it wasn't on the MLS, it'll be there, but it doesn't mean that it is. Okay, so if I go to MLS, you'll see different results, but when I go both, you'll see that when it's on the MLS, you'll actually have two entries. Okay, but you'll see the 1655, I only have public record. Okay, so this was probably an off-market sale, but 1611 Cherry Hill, you'll see there's two. It's to have an MLS and a public record entry. Okay, 1600 Cherry, only public record. That one's quite a bit more, so that would be interesting to know why. 2370 Old Mill, you could see it has both. Okay, and then, we're not go one by one, but you get the idea is, yeah, there's a number of off-market sales here, and that actually might be fine because it's at a lower price point. And the lower the price point, the more common you'll see that, right? As the price point goes up, you generally see that less and less. But again, mileage will vary. I'm going to take this down so that we're looking at, say, the last 6 months, or we're going to call it the last 5.5. Okay, and you'll see that narrows it down just a little bit, but still, that is a lot of data. So I might even say, you know what, I'm just going to go back 3 months on this one. Okay, and really, I'm going to go back 2.5 months. I still have a pretty good bit. So this has the wrong year. That's the problem. Holy cow, what am I doing? There we go. That's much better. I was like, why is there so much data? This is the wrong year. Okay, now you'll see it almost narrowed it down too much. So I'm going to back it up to September here. Okay, so now we have a reasonable amount of data. Not too crazy, but roughly 5.5 months. I'm gonna look at the square footage, more or less, we're going plus or minus roughly 250 square feet again, which are approximately 20%. Going at a half a mile. Uh, could I narrow down the bedroom count? I could if I just looked at a quick glance. Everything's a 3 or more. Okay, I mean, this is very close, so I'm not going to really mess with those parameters. If I look at the year built, just a quick glance, you'll see everything's more or less, this is a fairly stock property, not too many changes. Sometimes you'll see wide variety, and then you have to start making some adjustments in here, okay? Another thing you'll see is lot size. Again, a couple of 20,000 square footers, but by and large, everything was kind of close. This guy's kind of small over here, okay? Now, the main thing I'm going to do is you'll see I got 3 properties on the south side of this 138. 138 is actually a fairly busy road. So what I like to do is we generally like to keep comps on one side of major roads. Okay, it is not uncommon to cross a major road and the market totally shift on one side of the road versus the other. So what I might do in that scenario is say, you know what, I'm going to just do a little draw thing. And let's see, I'm going to just kind of just draw around this guy. And we're going to click there, and then we're going to click over here. We're going to click here. And, and there you go. So then I'll hit enter. Okay, that's going to get rid of these 3 on this side. And now I've got a nice set of comps. And even this 8 and 9 could be debatable, but we'll see. Let's dive in. So now we're looking at these sales, and what are we seeing? Well, now we got some rentals. How do we know they're rentals? Because they're $1,500 instead of roughly 200,000. So we're going to click those off and just go ahead and get rid of those. Okay. And that will take care of that. Unfortunately, I don't have a pricing filter here to filter them out that way, but that's fine. So, and then I can scroll over and start getting a feel for the value. You'll see here 218, 190, 215, 219, 200, all relatively close to each other. Okay, relatively close. You'll see the square footages are fairly comparable. The lot size minus this guy right here and these at the bottom, fairly comparable. You'll see the age of the house. They're all 80s. Okay, this is kind of an ideal, easy one to comp. Some properties that can get really wild and you gotta like really dive in to figure out, okay, this one's good, this one, maybe, this one's not. This one is pretty straightforward, which is nice. Okay. Okay, it'll show you price per square foot. And then you'll get, does it have a pool, the name of the subdivision, and then this is a good one, how close they are. So you can make sure everything's, nice and close by in the ballpark. You'll see here our property is the one that has no number in it. So the closest comp is number one because it's across the street. Matter of fact, it even tells you it was a cash transaction. And you'll see they paid 218. Okay, so that's going to be a pretty good indicator right now. We haven't looked at pictures yet, but that's going to probably be a pretty good indicator where we're going to land. If I click on this, we'll see some pictures. One of the beautiful things about Propstream is it'll show you pictures of the comparables. You'll get a feel for what a $218,000 house looks like. Okay. So that's actually a fairly nice little setup. The cabinets are kind of classic, but it's okay. Some stainless, clean countertop, nothing particularly fancy. Got some laminate or LVP floors, one of the two. They did some updated light fixtures, a tile shower. Okay, so just a nice, clean, simple house. We look outside, lines by and large clean. They have a screen, but nice if they'd put that away, but it's okay. Um, Fairly straightforward, right? Roof looks kind of good in that picture. Got a garage, unpainted garage floor, common for the price point. But you can see there's the back of the house. So it's a simple house. It's simple, okay? And if we look at our subject property, and let's just pop in here real quick, you'll see here we have a split level home. Okay, we've got a split level home. In fact, in this one, the estimate is actually reasonable at 208. It's not way off from what we were seeing in Propstream. So that's nice. Okay, we all know that estimates can be wildly off. In this case, it's relatively close, so that's good. Now, what you'll notice here is you also have a number of other comps nearby, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We already know we kicked out 3 through 6, so we basically have 2 and 7 right there. 2 being this is a $190,000, 7 this is a $215,000 sale, and then you have 8 and 9, which are over here, 219 and a $200,000 sale. So we can tell right off the bat. Again, this one's pretty easy, pretty much the same neighborhood. Maybe you could argue, what, maybe this road is a little too busy to include those. I mean, it's possible. But the one thing I'm also noticing that could, and maybe it's part of why the values are where they are, there's a high school right here. And a lot of times when you're by a school, sometimes that'll it'll inflate prices a little bit, or maybe a lot if it's a great school district. But if it's just your average school district, sometimes the houses close to a school don't get as much value because, right, like the lights are on over the stadium, you get the fall football noise, or maybe it's some extracurricular activity in the spring, right? Like it's just some of those extracurricular noises. Is that an impact here? It may not be because that one right there sold for 218. It's right next to it. So that tells me when the values are kind of steady, but yet in spite of having some extracurricular distraction in terms of a school here, which can be kind of noisy being high school sports and all that, that's good, right? It tells me stability. It tells me I don't really have to spend a lot of time making adjustments and that sort of thing. Speaking of schools, if you want to go to see what the schools are like, you can go to like a propertyscout.com, for example, and see. Now, this particular property, based on what I'm seeing here, 190, 218, 219, 200, 215, it's perfectly reasonable to think this thing's got an ARV, in that low twos range. Yeah, would I go over 219? Probably not, unless the house had something really special. But the house needs about 50,000 in work based on the pictures. I'm not going to go through the pictures right now, but we did pull them up, and it was, in our market, a cosmetic rehab's running about $20 a square foot. So, eh, when you just do a quick number on that, 1380 times 20, that's going to be, you're getting on almost to $28,000 just for the cost. And they had other things, right? Like we got to fix some siding, we need to fix the deck, we got to repaint the exterior, which, you know, it's not tiny, it's expensive. By the time you start adding all those things up, we came in at roughly in the high 40s, which, you know, so we just rounded up to 50,000 because those always those odds and ends. And so that's where this thing's landed. So now I know right off the bat, if I'm just going to use the 70% rule just to make it simple, I would say let's call it 210 and you multiply that times zero point 0.7, right? That's 147,000 minus 50,000 in repairs. I already know I need to be at around 99,000 ish to buy this. And really, I got to be less because I still got to pay for closing costs. If I'm going to bring a hard money person in, I got to pay for that, right? Or maybe there's a bird dog involved. You got to pay for that. If there's a wholesaler, there's their fee. Like there's all kinds of things that can come up. Okay, if there was HOA, that would be another thing, an initiation fee, which is common with HOAs. So what am I getting at? You can use Propstream to really dial in the data really closely, but just don't forget you need some of that local knowledge. What's going on in the community, if at all possible? It's always nice to talk to a local realtor when you're locking something down. Talk to a local realtor that can give you those really intense local insights to help you. If they can get you MLS comps, even better. Of course, don't just ask for it, offer value in some way. Okay, depending on what your goal is for the property, right? Like maybe you're buying to rent, maybe they can let them put an ad on the MLS and rent it for you. That's a value add, right? Okay, and if you're flipping it, maybe they're your listing agent. Try to just, you know, or maybe they have a need in their business you can help with in return for them giving you some comparables. Okay, you want to offer value, okay? Because they don't just want to do it. Some of them will even want to charge you for it. I'm like, right, like, do you really want to be paying someone just to run comps, right? Yeah, I mean, there could be a use case for that for sure. On a $200,000 house, probably not, right? If it was 20 million, that's a different story, right? Like you're happily paying for quality information. $200,000 house, not quite as critical, but you know, bring value to these realtors. Because if they can get you that local intel, having a conversation with them, have them tell you about it, tell you about the area. Well, how do you find them? Well, the beautiful thing PropStream is these properties that sold on the MLS, it will actually tell me who the listing agent was. Perfect. So you can call them up and say, hey, you know, are they local to that area? Because, right, some agents can list properties far away from where they live. You're looking for the ones that know the area inside out. They live down the street, you know, a block over, a neighborhood or two over, right? They know they have that intimate knowledge. Incredibly invaluable. So PropStream will get you a lot of the way there, but if you're gonna wholesale it, this is probably enough, quite frankly. Or you can go to the realtor. If you're going to flip it, you definitely want the realtor, right? To give you that local MLS intel because they're going to know some things that you don't know. Okay. They're going to know some things that you don't know. And that's a good thing for you because sometimes those things that they know that you don't know will literally make the difference in a deal. We recently looked at a property that was on the lake, and one realtor pitched it as $1 million home, and two other realtors like, no, 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 no. And they provided some very strong evidence to support their objection to that. And what we learned was the property was really worth 750 to 800 once fixed up. Well, I can tell you that killed the deal without question. The wholesaler was disappointed, understandably so. But, you know, again, remember when people pitch you deals, they're pitching you the best case scenario. Your job is to use a tool like PropStream to really dive down and analyze the data. You know, we could go through the pictures of every one of these properties, right? Like we can actually go into the details. If I click this, it'll open up a window and we can look at the details of each of those. One example would be our subject property is a split level. That first comp, you know, we look at this. This is not a split level, so we could sit here and say, well, let's go through the split level homes. or find the ones which are split leveled. So we'll go here, say that's a ranch house. We can go here, we'll see if there's a split level anywhere. Okay, so you'll see there's the house. Nope, that's a ranch house. If we click on this, we're going to get this. Okay, and this is a ranch house. Okay, a lot of ranches, which people like around here. Understood. Okay, that's a ranch house. Okay, again, another ranch house. Wow. There we go. Now we have a split level home. Now, the other thing is, I don't know if this is for rental or for sale. So let's take a look. But this 1461, no, that was a sale. Okay, so now I know with some confidence, people are willing to pay this price point for a split level home. Because that matters a lot of times. Split levels are not as desirable as ranches or two-story traditional. Okay. Okay, people are a little pickier with that, but that's something we like to see. That's a good comp. That's definitely a good comp for us. Okay, and then we've got this one that was off market. It's a ranch. Then we've got this one. That's the same property. Sorry. We got this one. It's a ranch. So what did we learn? We learned we have one split level home. Now we still have others in the neighborhood, and appraiser's not going to ignore that, but he's going to give more weight technically to the split level because that's what we are. Okay, so that's something to be aware of when appraisers look at these deals. You always got to think like an appraiser. Like, yeah, you're trying to think, okay, if I'm a wholesaler, what can I sell for? If I'm a buyer, what can I get it for to do my remodel? But you always want to think about what would an appraiser say? Because appraiser hats are going to put, they're going to give it a little bit different spin to things. And I encourage everybody talk to an appraiser when you're learning how to comp. Get a feel. I mean, the knowledge those guys will give you is incredibly invaluable. So, love this tool. Love that it works. This was an easy example. I might do another one that's quite a bit harder to sort that out. But for this purpose, leverage Propstream. Use it. If you don't have MLS access, this thing is nationwide. It does a really nice job. And and I don't really use a ton of the other features in the software. I don't really need to. Just if I'm looking at this is gold. Okay. The ability to use the most accurate data to the best of our ability is important. And Propstream does a pretty good job keeping things current, but they're not perfect. I'm not going to tell you they're perfect. Okay. Nothing beats the MLS, but this does a solid job. So hope this helps, and we'll see you in another video.